Mariama was the kind of woman the entire village of Umuka whispered about. Blessed with beauty sharp enough to turn heads and a sharp tongue to match, she was known for her stubborn refusal to engage in even the simplest tasks. Her husband, Ola, a kind-hearted and hard-working farmer, had carried the burden of their home on his weary shoulders for years. From fetching water at the cracked well to preparing food under the relentless African sun, Ola did it all while Mariama lounged under the mango tree, fanning herself and criticizing his every move. At first, villagers had sympathized. "She'll change with time," the elders said. But time passed, and Mariama grew even lazier, cloaking herself in entitlement. Her excuse was always the same: "A woman as beautiful as me deserves to be served." Ola's mother, Enkay, would often shake her head bitterly when she visited. "A home where only one hand works will soon crumble," she warned. But Ola, bound by love and the shame of a failed marriage, endured. One afternoon, under the oppressive heat of the dry season, something changed. Ola returned from the fields with a stranger. A tall, regal woman named Madame Kofo, known across neighboring towns as a fixer of homes, one who trained spoiled wives through a secret method no one dared speak openly about. Her eyes were sharp, reading the soul like a sacred text. Mariama laughed when she saw her. "And what is this old woman supposed to do?" she sneered. Without a word, Madame Kofo smiled and set down her small woven bag. That night, Mariama found her luxurious mattress replaced with a thin raffia mat. Her silver mirror vanished, replaced by a cracked shard. Even her perfumes were gone, replaced with a tiny clay pot of shea butter. Mariama raged and stormed through the house, but Ola simply shook his head. "Madame Kofo is in charge now." The next morning, Madame Kofo stood at the door at sunrise. "Today, you will learn," she said, her voice as calm as the still river before a storm. Mariama scoffed and turned her back. But when she went to the kitchen for her usual breakfast of yam porridge, she found the pots empty, the fire cold. There would be no meals unless she cooked them. No clean clothes unless she washed them. No fresh water unless she fetched it herself. Ola had vanished to the fields, and Madame Kofo only watched, impassive. At first, Mariama refused to move, sitting stubbornly under the mango tree all day. But hunger gnawed at her stomach like a persistent rat. Thirst dried her throat to sandpaper. The house grew wild with dust and filth. That night, as the full moon hung heavy in the star-pricked sky, Mariama lay awake on her scratchy mat, feeling the reality settle deep into her bones. Life would no longer serve her on a golden platter. But this was only the beginning. Mariama woke to the shrill crowing of roosters and the biting smell of unwashed clothes hanging heavy in the room. Her stomach twisted painfully. It had been nearly 2 days since she had eaten anything meaningful. Hunger was no longer a passing discomfort, it was a sharp, relentless drum beating inside her. She stumbled into the kitchen, hoping to find something, anything. Instead, she found Madame Kofo sitting by the hearth, calmly mending a torn piece of cloth. She did not even look up as Mariama entered. "There's rice in the storehouse," Madame Kofo said, voice steady as stone. "Fetch water. Start a fire. Cook it yourself." Mariama clenched her fists. Back in her father's house, servants had cooked for her. In her marriage, Ola had pampered her endlessly. To dirty her own hands felt like an insult. But the growl of her stomach was louder than her pride. Biting back her resentment, she wrapped a scarf around her head and trudged to the well at the edge of the village. It was a long, exhausting walk under the merciless sun. The path was rough and cracked, thorns clawing at her ankles. By the time she reached the well, she was drenched in sweat, her legs trembling. She pulled up the heavy bucket with awkward, clumsy arms, spilling more water than she saved. Villagers passing by watched in stunned silence. Some chuckled. Others shook their heads. Even the proud ones must bow to life, an old woman muttered under her breath. By the time Mariama stumbled back to the house, her palms were blistered, and tears of frustration blurred her vision. She barely managed to light the fire, fumbling and burning her fingers in the process. When she finally sat down to eat her poorly cooked rice, hard, smoky, and tasteless, she wept into her plate. That night, Madame Kofo visited her again. This time, the older woman sat beside her and, without mockery or cruelty, spoke plainly. "You were not born to be a queen in an empty castle," she said, her voice low. "A marriage is not built on one back alone. A woman's beauty may open doors, but only her strength keeps them open." Mariama said nothing, but the words rooted themselves deep inside her. She realized, with a clarity she had never allowed before, that Ola's hands had grown callous from years of carrying a weight she should have shared. Her heart twisted in a new kind of ache, not from hunger, but from shame. The next morning, before the sun had even risen, Mariama woke on her own. She tied her wrapper firmly around her waist, grabbed the calabash, and headed to the well, this time with determination instead of resentment. Madame Kofo watched from a distance, a small knowing smile playing on her lips. But fate was not done with Mariama yet. Something was coming, something that would test whether her change was true or temporary. Weeks passed, and the change in Mariama was undeniable. She no longer lounged under the mango tree while Ola labored alone. Instead, she rose before dawn, fetching water, pounding yam, and tending the small garden she had once despised. Her once delicate hands grew rough, but her spirit grew stronger. The villagers, once full of ridicule, now nodded in quiet approval as they watched her carrying baskets, laughing with the market women, and walking proudly beside Ola. Even Mom Nkechi, who had sworn Mariama was a lost cause, smiled when she visited, muttering, "Perhaps even the wildest river can find its path." Ola, too, changed. The weight that had bent his back seemed lighter now, and the spark that had dimmed in his eyes slowly returned. For the first time in years, laughter filled their home, real laughter, not the bitter kind. One evening, as the sun melted into a golden horizon and the scent of roasting maize floated through the village, Ola fell terribly ill. It began with a fever that boiled his blood and drained his strength. The village healer came, shaking his head grimly. "It is the sickness of the blood. It will take him unless the spirits favor him." Mariama sat by his side, mopping his forehead with trembling hands. Fear gripped her like a noose. She realized then how deeply she loved him, not for what he had provided, but for the soul he had patiently bared to her all these years. Days blurred into nights. Mariama barely ate or slept. She became a ghost in her own home, living only for the hope of Ola's recovery. She offered prayers at the old Iroko tree, gave offerings at the river, and sang lullabies into the feverish dark, refusing to give up. At the peak of the seventh night, when the moon hung low and fat in the sky, Ola stirred. His eyes, sunken but alive, met hers. With a hoarse voice, he whispered, "Thank you, Mariama." Tears streamed down her face as she clutched his hand. In that moment, she understood the true meaning of marriage. It was not about being served, nor about appearances. It was about partnership, sacrifice, and resilience. Ola's recovery was slow, but steady. Together, they rebuilt not just their home, but their bond. Mariama never returned to her old ways. Her pride now came not from being adored, but from being dependable, from being Ola's equal. Madame Kofo eventually left Umuka, her job done. But before she left, she pulled Mariama aside and said softly, "Strength is not in refusing to fall. It is in rising each time you do." And so, Mariama's story became a quiet legend in Umuka, a reminder whispered from mother to daughter: beauty may catch the eye, but only character captures the heart. In the end, Mariama had met her match, not in Madame Kofo, not even in hardship, but in the mirror of her own transformed soul. End of part 3.